All right, I think we're live in an effort to stay on time with this thing because I'm running late. I'm walking through the parking lot back to my car. I had to go meet up with Ben because I was missing like two little pieces for my blue mat setup, and I didn't want to wait any longer because I just need to get it done today. So, yeah, last minute detour. And so I'm going to have to do this live from my car once I get back to it here in the parking lot. But what's going on with you, man?
Um, Finding silver linings, man. So I'm trying to do that big sour uh, versus sour run with all those different sours, and one of the cuts that I'm waiting on. I've been waiting on it for over a month, and I just got an email today saying that they lost power and they lost all my cuts, and so it might be
Oh,
another.
no.
Sounds like another month before I can start this round. There's not really any sense of starting it early, you
Why
know.
not?
Well, because I won't be able to compare everything I want to compare. And so, you know, let's say I've got 5 sours and I'm missing one. I'll wait 4 weeks so that I can run them all together. But I don't know. It might hold me up about 6 weeks, maybe longer. So I'm kind of bummed. And I've been running in circles to get this one ready. And I just did my big, reset in my room and everything. I was super pumped. Everything's clean, ready to go. Everything's planted. And then I got that email today. But I appreciate them at least being transparent. That's very
Yeah.
much appreciated. And they're sending me a bunch of other cuts that are highly coveted to make up for it. So, it's a win in the long term. I just, I'm always panicked. I'm going to run out of weed. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Well, good. I'm
yeah,
glad. I'm glad to comment at least.
yeah, yeah. So it's good to hear that, gets some acknowledgement of what's going on. So I appreciate transparency with people. Like old people like me from the old days, if somebody's not picking up the phone or not responding to you, they're dodging you. And so, I get really nervous when people aren't responding to emails or calls or whatever. And just
Yeah.
a simple, hey, I screwed up, something's wrong. That goes a real long way with me because I understand after 40 years that stuff goes wrong. It's a plant and it's easy to mess up. So, yeah. So all's well that will end well.
Yeah. I guess the news on my end was I just talked to Don Marshall today. We're gonna make an effort to finish up this botany course in the next couple months, so that'll be available hopefully soon for folks that want to,
Real
you know,
cool.
take botany without going back to school, but actually learn it from a genuine horticulture botany professor. If folks haven't had a chance to listen to my interview with Don Marshall on the Cannabis Cultivation and Science podcast, it's a good one. He's such a great guy, super smart.
Great speaker and just
Yeah,
the nicest people ever. Yeah. Yeah. And man, does he know his stuff. Yeah.
he really does. So, yeah, so that's exciting. And then the other thing, so there's this product out called the Grow Sensor, and the founder of it, they're out of Europe. He reached out to me and told me about the product, and I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical because the price point, it's a few $100. Plus I think there might be a small subscription. I don't know, but it wasn't like a cheap, it kind of straddles the between like, your Inkbird, like super cheap AC Infinity, Vivor, those sorts of brand Spider Farmer stuff for home growers, and then like nice controller, Troll Master commercial system things for like commercial growers. It's kind of like this in between price point, but um he sent me one, and I actually told him, I'm like, hey, don't send me one at first, because I'm like, I don't know how I would use it or be able to sell it or promote it really for what it is. But he's like, no, I really want you to try it out, give me feedback, and we'll go from there. So I said, okay, because I have this thing with like samples or free products and things like that. Like, as someone who owns a business, like I never want to take product from people unless I can really provide value back, because I know it costs money and, time to create these products. And so I want to be respectful of that. And he sent it to me. And I'll have to, maybe next live, I can go in my room and show you guys. But it's really cool. It does, uh, it measures soil moisture. It measures, DLI, VPD on the fly. So you get humidity, temperature. It just sits, it's battery powered or AC powered. So I'm running it on battery and I hooked it up last week. It's still at 100% battery. He said I'll make it the full cycle without needing to charge it. Um, it measures PPFD. So hanging in the canopy, they'll tell me my PPFD. It measures my leaf VPD. Um, and I'm getting all these metrics all the time graphed on my phone. um, it's really cool. So I just looked and saw, like, I just watered and I could see the graph change as the water, um, as the percent moisture percent went up in the
What
soil.
metric? What all metrics is it giving you? Is it giving you EC?
Yeah, so I get EC. So I watched EC drop when I watered, and I watched the water volume go up. Um, Interesting enough, on the soil right now, the EC is like 3.5. It's pretty high. Um, Plants look great. So I need to calibrate it with my pulse meter. I haven't done that yet to see what the EC reads on that. But the data it's collecting is really interesting. And so I'm excited about that. And then he's got this other product called Grow Diaries that the two don't speak to each other yet. But if they ever did, man, that would be a phenomenal product because the Grow Diary essentially is just like everything you want as a grower all in one digital form, so you can track your entire grow all the way through. It's a really cool idea. Um, so yeah, that's, I don't know. It's just an exciting new product. It's called Grow Sensor. I think the website is growsensor.io off the top of my head. But if you Google it, he sends out periodic emails that I think are, about environment that I think are interesting. I'm on his mailing list. So again, I don't sell the product. I don't know that I endorse it. I just think so far it's pretty cool. So if you do have some extra money laying around and you wanted to really dial in your environment or have access to be able to view it remotely and feel good about it, he uses higher quality sensors than some of these other lower price point products, which I can appreciate. So, anyway, I didn't mean this to turn into a whole product video. We can get on to questions.
No, that's cool though, because I had a conversation with Brian, who's Brian from Minneapolis, who's regularly attends these, and we were talking about something similar this morning, and he was talking about how much he was enjoying being able to get all that data. So that's perfect timing.
Yeah, one of the issues I have is like with my dehumidifier and my humidifier, um, even this, like the sensors on these things, the range to where they kick off are not as tight as I would like. And so I, sorry, every time I get a call, it's going to kick me out of here. But it's just not as I would want. So I end up having bigger swings and fluctuations in my room than I want. So when I pull air out of my room, my humidity drops, 10 to 15% relative to just lose 5 degrees of temperature. Because right now I have too much heat. And so then the humidifier will kick on. But getting all those things dialed, they can't, they all have too flexible of a range the way I'm doing because everything's piecemeal, that my room fluctuates more than I would like it to. But I think that's the reason I'm bringing it up is just because I think that's a reality that a lot of growers have to deal with.
Yep.
Um, so
I
having something
loved
that
it
can
one time.
measure
There
that, even though it's not a controller, which would be really cool,
was somebody made a
it's a nice
comment.
thing to be able to check out.
Yeah, somebody made a comment in here one time on one of
Oh,
these
is
about
it frozen? This froze my video. Shoot, let me
uh,
refresh my screen. Sorry.
oh, looks like we lost Tad. Hey, so this is a volcano bag, and oh, Tad's back. But I'll finish this. So yeah, volcano. This is Kevin. For anybody who hasn't met Kevin, I've had this volcano for about 30 years, and after people that know me really well know that I work out a lot, and post COVID, I'm trying to get back into it really hard because I'm really bummed of how much I fell off with my conditioning. So I'm using the Volcano a lot just so I can get back into my cardio stuff real hard. Um, I love how it tastes, vaping versus, like I'll smoke a joint. I've been on the Volcano for a couple of weeks straight now, and I'll smoke a joint with my wife, and it doesn't matter how good it tastes. It tastes horrible, it tastes like ass. The reason, and yeah, $12 for a replacement bag is crazy, but I quit using the turkey bags. My buddy Jeff, who's on here sometimes, hipped me that they spray the inside of those with some sort of silicone, and so maybe not the best thing to be smoking out of. And I'll just tell on myself, my favorite thing to do with the Volcano bags is I used to, when my youngest was born, we had a diaper genie, and it's just this never ending tube that you can stuff diapers and horrible stuff into and then throw it out. But so I would just take an unscented one that's like 20 feet long and just run the Volcano into it so many times until it filled up. Because I was in a prohibition state, I'd throw that 20-foot bag in the car and drive someplace, because if I get pulled over, there's no weed in the car. I pop that bag and all their evidence is gone. And so that was one of my little ways of rolling around, kind of low key. But anyway, Tad's back.
Oh, geez, I never would have thought to do that. Anyway, yeah. So every time I'm on my phone, unfortunately for this one, and it looks like anytime anyone calls on Zoom or I get a notification, it's going to kick me out here. So I put it on Do Not Disturb, and hopefully we can get through these questions without any more interruptions. So apologies for that. All right. This is the first question. What can we do to begin to prep our outdoor soil for next season?
Great
That's a great question.
and timely.
Yeah. Now is a good time, I think, to cover your soil. If you have it can be as simple like here in the Northwest, we get a lot of maple leaves. So using a leaf mulch to collect all those leaves, because I don't spray any chemicals or herbicides. I don't spray anything, mostly out of laziness. So I can use those leaves safely in my garden beds. And so that's one great option. They'll just break down. They'll insulate the soil. They'll add good biology. They'll add a little bit of fertility.
Do
That's one
the
of the
do
biggest
the
things I like to do.
do the big leaf maples, do those do anything to the pH at all? They don't drag it either direction. I'm assuming not.
I haven't noticed anything. I don't see why they would. And they just add maybe a little bit of carbon, but it's such a small amount. And then in the spring, I would just scrape off what's left and throw them in the compost pile. You could do a cover crop this time of year. Just realize if you do introduce a cover crop, you may have to terminate it, which means typically like having to broad fork or till it. So there is some labor on the back end, more labor come springtime. If you go that route, but that is another option depending on what your goals are. If you're trying to deal with compaction or add fertility or add organic matter, um, those are all things to consider. Well, I guess one thing to think about is now is not the time of year to add nutrients. You could add things like calcium or maybe sulfur this time of year, but for the most part, you want to wait until spring to add a lot of your nutrients.
The only
Yes.
the one thing that I would put in now is phosphorus. That's the one thing I'd put in now. I would you could add compost if you want to. I typically wait until spring to add compost, but if you added compost and phosphorus right now, that's the best way to get ahead of your available phosphorus number come spring. It's going to tend to sit in the soil. It breaks down really slowly. So that's really the only thing I really try to make sure I get into the ground during.
Yeah, things like nitrogen and potassium are going to leach pretty readily. So you wouldn't want to add them now. The only other situation I could think of is like if I had a compost that I knew had excess sodium or castings that had excess sodium, I could probably add them now, knowing that the sodium would leach before at least here in the Northwest, before I ever was going to plant into it. So it'd be a good way to get organic matter without having to deal with a lot of that stuff. So
Same with dairy wash and manures. You'll wash a lot of that salt out of them.
yeah. Okay, sorry, I have to scroll through on my phone to catch up on questions
Somebody's
here.
grabbing a diaper genie when they get home. Great. That's awesome.
How do you germinate seeds? Brandon, I'll let you tackle that one because you have a lot more experience with it than I do.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things. I was talking about this recently. Um, Having moved from South Carolina, where it's hot all the time, to the PNW, the upper corner of the PNW, where it's not really cold. It's the same temperature almost all year round. It's kind of perfect, but it's like it's a little on the chilly side at 60 degrees, 55 degrees to be popping seeds. So I have started using a heat mat when I'm popping seeds. Um, 10 years ago and everything up until then, I'd been either direct seeding or putting into a wet paper towel in a baggie, and just sitting at someplace warm. Um, these days I do mainly because when I buy seeds, they're usually really steep. They're expensive, and so I will scarify them. And the way that we used to do it was we take a matchbox and put two pieces of we'd cut a piece of sandpaper and put the seeds in between those, and then just sit there and shake the matchbox. A friend of mine, Jeff, sent me these little pieces of PVC. They're about this long, and he glues a piece of sandpaper inside of it, and so you just put your finger on either side and sit there and watch a KiS podcast and shake your seeds. And so I'll scarify a little bit, and then I will float them in water for 24 to 48 hours. Then I go into a paper towel, and then I plant those into an appropriate mix, something that doesn't have like big chunky pumice. And not that, I mean, I do plant directly into our soil sometimes, but I go into small cups, and I'll baby them for the first couple of days just to make sure that tap root gets down in there and gets wet.
Yeah, whatever soil or media you do go into, all I want to add is that you want something that has good gas exchange. Oh, that's super loud.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Something with good gas exchange, something with good air exchange, that's not going to hold on to too much water, so you can. So think of something very light and airy, something like a pro mix or a seed starter mix is going to be, maybe 50% perlite instead of, a third, 30% aeration. You can get up to like 50% for specifically for seed mix, and they don't want something super fertile either. You want something that doesn't have a lot of nutrients. And then once you have a taproot, once the plant's got a couple true leaves, then you can look at going into something that has more fertility, a more robust, heavier mix.
Yeah, they've got everything they need for the first 2 weeks. I know folks that will do sprouted seed teas and all these other things, but the seed has had thousands and thousands of years to develop this perfect little personal SOP where it has everything that it needs. And so I don't find any of those to be necessary unless I've got, you know, um, if somebody brought me some seeds they found in their dad or granddad's, sock drawer from the 70s, I probably add a little gibberellic acid or something, just, in the hopes that I could get those to actually pop. But for
So yeah, I just want to add. So the idea behind sprouted seed teas or coconut water is that a seed contains all the nutrients, enzymes, everything it needs to grow for its initial stages of life. And something like coconut is the largest seed. It's, like a giant embryo. And so that fluid, that coconut water, or reconstituted coconut powder is going to be higher in a lot of those nutrients and enzymes that an initial seed may need to grow. So by adding more of those, you may supercharge it. I haven't seen any research on it one way or another. Anecdotally, some people really love it and it's part of their SOPs. So I don't necessarily think it could hurt anything if you do it correctly. You can absolutely screw up a sprouted seed tea and make things worse, but in general, it's a pretty safe thing if you want to incorporate into your SOPs. So,
Same with the B vitamins. I skip that for seeds too. I've just never seen any data. The only data I've seen has been kind of contrary to that.
yeah. So, next question. Puff the Magic Grandpa asks, I've always believed without scientific basis that overly leafy colas are the result of too much nitrogen. Is this true or is it something else? So, larfy buds. What are the variables that contribute to, yeah, more, less dense larfy colas?
So I don't. So if he's talking, he might be talking about larvae, but which is a loose, open, airy bud that's not getting enough light. Um, I
Oh, you,
think I think he's asking about leaf to calyx ratio because
ah,
there's some plants that are like the trimmer's dream that you pop two leaves off and next, and then there's some that are just kind of like we always called them hairy, and it's a bud and it's just got tons of little leaves out of it. And as far as I know, that's genetic. Where larf is usually a lack of light. Um, when you get a really hairy bud with a ton of little sugar leaves. Um, that I think is genetic. That's I just did this huge genetic hunt, and there was a small handful, maybe 3 or 4 in there that were like that. And just because it's got to be really stellar pot for me to want to keep one of those. The terps and the effect have to be just mint because it's just a pain in the butt to handle. But I think it's genetic.
yeah. In terms of the bud density, like how dense the actual bud is, nitrogen will create, differences in your internodal spacing. Um, it can create a harsher bud. You can absolutely get lower yields with too much nitrogen. Um, when I
Diminished
think of
terpene,
like,
delays
yeah,
sense, does a bunch of bad stuff.
when I think of like bud density or larvier buds, because I just was talking to a guy about this actually today, and so we
He's
talked about.
he did say he clarified the buds are tight and it's too much leaf on the bud. So he's talking about hairy buds as opposed to larf. But
Okay,
but larf is always fun to talk about.
all I was gonna say is that the main variable I think of there is potassium. Typically, in terms of bud density, one of the most important nutrients for that. So, if you are seeing that, like you grow the same genetics and they're just, I guess we'll say larvier, then you could, if you're not doing a soil test, you could look to add some potassium mid-cycle and see if that increases or improves that scenario.
And make sure
And
light's crucial. No,
yeah,
if you don't have adequate light, no amount of fertility is going to give you a nice nuggy. But I want to bring this point up. This is a good time to mention this. So there was a interview that I saw with Staten Island Gabby with Dave and Tony from Budulero, who do the pearls, and I think probably most folks in here have seen that. Um, I really liked what Dave had to say about, but nuggy buds, big, and he said, and I'm old enough to remember this as well. Most of the really knockdown, drag out, amazing herb from late '60s, early '70s, it was pretty ugly, and like I'm growing some really ugly haze right now. Looks, like something that you would just walk right past. I'm sure it's going to be, it's a Tom Hill haze. I've got a Band-Aid haze. I got a Tropicana haze. Like those are all going to be phenomenal when they finish. Um, but just because something's larfy doesn't mean you shouldn't try it. I threw a party one time where I had just had a harvest. I put out cereal bowls full of every different strain, and had Kevin had the volcano set up, bongs, joints, whatever. Invited a bunch of friends over. Nobody smoked the haze until my one friend that I knew in South Carolina that grew, and he showed up and he was like, "Oh shit, nobody touched the haze," and I'm like, "Been waiting for you, let's go." And so just because it's larvae doesn't mean it won't knock your socks off. So keep that in mind. You know, like when you're ranking what's important to you as far as your cannabis, terpene, effect, trimmability, growability, what it looks like's way down on my list, you know. So sorry, rant over. Not really even a rant, just a thought.
All right, can you explain why the soil needs to rest some before the planting for indoor? Um, well, I think it's Daniel. I don't know that soil does need to rest. I don't know that there is a lot to that. Um, the only thing I would say is the reason I think this exists is because people add nutrients and they want those nutrients to appropriately cycle before they put their next plant in, especially if you're just top dressing in no-till. It's going to take a while for the fertility to work its way through the soil profile. If you're incorporating and tilling it into the soil, then I think that that process is a lot faster. But so I don't think you're necessarily having to wait. I mean, typically on the commercial side, what are most of our guys doing, Brandon? Like harvest one day, um, harvest and reamend are typically on the same day, and then they may be bringing in their next crop a day later.
Most folks are back in the soil 24 to 72 hours later at the most, but most folks I would say are 24 to 48 hours in. The
Yeah.
only thing I would say about resting soil is if you're adding, and there's multiple ways to approach this. You know, we try to be as close to a water only SOP, so we're trying to do as limited touches and as limited applications as we can. That's just part of our methodology. But if you've got, you know, if you end um, at the, if you land like super low on nitrogen and you have to put a bunch of nitrogen into your soil for the next round, you could put it all in now and let it rest, because that is going to create heat, potential ammonification, and some other things that young roots are not going to like. Um, the other thing you could do is split that nitrogen application up over several applications, and so there's ways to get around it if you're, you know, if you're in a held to a production calendar. Um,
Mhm.
but the only reason I ever let soil um, rest is if I've added a bunch of nitrogen. And just as a matter of course, it's just one of my SOPs. Anytime I'm getting ready to plant that next round, just because I'm super uptight about things, I take my compost thermometer and I go around and I stab my soil just to make sure that my soil, if I turn it a little bit, stays at an ambient temperature and doesn't jack up. Because if you added compost that's potentially not completely finished, or again, like a bunch of nitrogen, you could be creating an issue where you're getting significant heat in your bed. But as long as you're not heating back up, you can go right back in.
Yeah, I want to throw this comment up from Pedro. I thought this was a good point. I know some people like to use soil that's very biologically active, and they, you know, because it's prophylactic, the good bugs will outcompete the bad bugs. With baby plants, you are at a higher risk for Pythium and other fungal diseases if you use a soil that is not sterile. So if you really want to do things by like best horticultural standards, yes, you would use soil that was sterile for popping seeds. Most people I work with, and even myself, I don't do this because we add compost to our seedling mix. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I did think that was a good point for people, especially if you're a new grower. I think that's a definite consideration to think about doing with your seeds, just to be on the safer side.
The issue that most people have with seeds is the seed duds because they did something, you know, they left it in water, you know, it, I'll leave them until the cotyledons pop sometimes in water. So like, um, but the seed will either dud, or the big thing that people reach out to me all the time is about dampening off. And part of the dampening off issue that you just touched on is if you go into a sterile peat and perlite mix as opposed to a really nice bioactive organic soil that's going to have good guys and bad guys in it, you're way less likely to end up with the dampening off issues. And also, um, a little bit of bro science that actually works. If you've got young seedlings and you see mold or algae growing on top of those cups, you can sprinkle just ground up kitchen cinnamon, and it will kill that mold and fungus and algae and everything on the surface. So it actually works.
Yeah, I just want to throw up this comment from Freedomborn. I am under the assumption that most people are over applying phosphorus as a general rule. Um, so I would assume that there's probably phosphorus deficiency in most soils and soil mixes. And I know Brandon and I don't always see eye to eye on that, but I think in general this industry massively over applies phosphorus, just like the lawn industry and just like the home garden industry and horticulture industry and ag industry. I think we all over reuse phosphorus because we see low phosphorus numbers all the time on very, very healthy, high yielding, good plants. And so I think some of our metrics potentially are too high. Um, just a side thought, but just wanted to throw that up there to share other
I don't,
people's comments.
yeah, I was going to say, I think it's more of the nitrogen to phosphorus ratio as opposed to high phosphorus making for short nodes. Like if you wanted really short nodes, you just restrict your boron to the point where you're getting rosetting. But I don't think that if you pump more phosphorus in, I don't think the plant's going to get tighter. I think it's the relationship of nitrogen to phosphorus that determines that. But I could be wrong, but that's my understanding. And then the only people that I think should really be pushing available phosphorus, because I do agree, I'm super proud of my kid. He just did a comic book for school about over application of phosphorus to the environment, and so I've been talking about with him with that, and almost everybody, row crops, golf courses, everybody overapplies phosphorus, and it ends up in as algal blooms and fish kills and all this other stuff. And so we should be way more judicious with it. Mineable phosphorus is a very quickly uh, disappearing input, so we should be judicious. The only people I think in cannabis that should be really pushing phosphorus are people that are battling arsenic fails in tight states.
So I just want to throw this comment up. I thought it was a good comment, just to highlight that genetics really play the biggest role in plant expression. All these other things, environment, fertility, water, in my opinion, are all second to genetics. So I think that's why people get so excited about genetics in general, is because they really do control plant expression more than anything else. And we see it with not just plants, but with humans and other animals too. So it's something to keep in mind when you're dealing with a particular plant. But if you've grown the same plant multiple times, the same genetics, and you're getting different expressions off across clones, then that does tell you that there's something else going on there that you can figure out. And um, yeah, adding under canopy or inter canopy or side lighting will absolutely increase your yield from the research I've seen, as well as increase the size and quality of your lower buds. There's a bunch of companies out there doing it. I'm running the BIOS under canopy lights. I know Fluence makes some too. Um, yeah, so I think it's a really interesting uh, newer application of lighting that I'm excited to experiment with this cycle, and so far so good.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how that turns out. The thing that I'm most curious about is the where you trim and where you don't with the under canopy.
All right, Little Nugs picked up a Mammoth brand one. Yeah, I think it would improve the lowers. I'm struggling with trimming a little bit because I don't know quite how to trim these as confidently as I do just top lighting, because I've been trimming top lighting buds for our plants for decades now. It feels like. Um, I don't know how it would shave off flower time. That is something I'm not quite sure what the mechanism would be. Um, but it would absolutely increase your yields because you're adding more light, and you're adding more light in a way that's very strategic. That's going to lead to less risk of photo bleaching, um, and other challenges associated with just throwing all the light from up top. But yeah, I just wanted to share because yeah, actually you will get your lowers to develop. So that's why I'm letting my lower light my um I'm leaving a lot more lower canopy, and I'm trying to just create a plant profile there, or column that's allows air and light through, but isn't as clean or as cleared out. Like on one side that I'm just running top lighting, I've taken out all the lowers and everything below, 8 to 12 inches of the top canopy there. Whereas on the side that I'm doing under canopy, I'm like leaving a lot of the lower stuff, trying to just thin out the middle, thinking about where the light's going to hit, and then we'll see how it finishes. So we'll see. Um,
I did see a note here in the side. Somebody said seed makers need some extra too, and I think they're referring to phosphorus, and that's definitely true. You do want your phosphorus and your calcium to be um, more than adequate for your moms if you're,
yeah.
for taking cuts or for breeding.
So I just want to throw this up here. If you're on a real budget for lighting, um, get a UL listed light at the very least, so you're not going to burn your house down. Um, get a pay for like maybe the photon light meter. That's the cheapest way to measure light, so you know exactly how much light you are adding. And then even as something as simple as like I again, it depends how cheap you want to go, like CFLs or cheap grow under canopy lights off of Amazon, or even through Alibaba would probably work. To me, the biggest risk of something like that is not that it's the right spectrum. It's just like what happens when these lights get a little bit of water on them, because they are going to be near your soil when you're watering. So you want something that has an IP rating, or you're kind of at risk of mixing electricity and water, which is not great. So be careful from that perspective, but um, I don't get caught up so much, I guess, in spectrum and some of these other things. There are some great commercially available ones, but they're definitely going to run you more like in the $200-300 range, instead of what you could get really cheap off of some of these other sites. So those are the things I would look at if I was trying to buy like a really cheap light. And then there's companies like like I mentioned before, like AC Infinity and Spider Farmer. I'm guessing, I haven't looked into it. I'm guessing they have under canopy solutions that are probably pretty cheap, relatively speaking, to the ones the companies that we work with, like BIOS and Fluence, that make like really high quality lights, but they're expensive. So, all right, moving down. Yeah, some people don't rest the soil. Talking about CFLs, I see like what I mentioned before. Yeah, you don't need to add a ton of light. Um, yeah, you want to add some LED strips. You can. Again, I just worry about mixing water and like, because if you're spraying in a room, if you're um, watering your plants, like today, I had to go in and hand get these stupid parts. This is like all I needed to finish my blue mat design, was like just some little tiny. I need like two of these, and that was it. And so it was super annoying. But I had to water today, and I was thinking about that as I was watering. Like I was trying not to get water on my under canopy lights, but I wasn't. I know they have an IP rating, so I'm not like overly concerned if water splashes up either on them. So I don't know. Just be safe.
Yeah.
Thought on using green aminos as nitrogen alternative. I don't know what green aminos are.
I think they're just talking about using some sort of organic amino acid for nitrogen, which is it's a really effective way to do it. You would have to figure out how often, your application frequency and rate. But I know that Bryant Mason likes aminos a lot. It
All
it's it the nice thing about aminos is that they're already in a form that the plant can easily assimilate. It's already kind of a building block, and so the plant uses a lot less energy to use that. So it's great. I like dry amendments. I think it makes sense financially, um, but it's definitely something that's an effective nitrogen alternative.
But I will add that all of our, organic amendments contain amino acids already. So it's not like by using fish meal or feather meal or fishbone meal or blood meal or bone meal or any alfalfa meal. All of these things are carbon based. They all contain amino acids. Um, it's not like you're not getting it from those sources too. So I don't know that you need to buy specific. It feels to me more like a marketing ploy than an actual like great difference in terms of what you're going to get from the product. But
I
there are
think
some
people
decent
like
ones on the market.
Yeah, I think people like the rapid response, but blood meal will do the same thing.
Mhm.
It's immediately available. You have to be careful with it. So, you know, but there's nothing wrong with it aside from cost to me.
Yeah, yeah, they work. What's the best terroir to achieve with indoor crops? So this idea of terroir is, for anyone who might not be familiar, is this idea that physical geography of a region, this comes from wine typically, is what I hear it associated with, creates a certain profile. So it brings out in the grapes that are grown there, let's say like a Chardonnay grape, for example, just to use an example, would produce a very specific flavor profile in this region, and that's related to the environment, so your environmental conditions as well as the mineral constituents of the soil. And we see this with like whiskey makers and distilleries even, how just very small changes in the still or where it's located can dramatically impact the aroma of the final product or the flavor profile of the final product. So I guess the things to consider from an indoor perspective, I look at Torah as like bringing out the maximizing genetic potential of whatever the genetics are. So again, end of the day, genetics are key. So you're not going to take shitty genetics and end up with an amazing final plant. Whereas you could take really great genetics and grow it really poorly and still probably end up with something better. So again, keep in mind genetics rule this conversation. But in terms of bringing out that genetic potential, I think that's a combination of good environmental conditions, uh, sufficiency in fertility, and then balance in fertility, proper moisture levels, and then potentially something around stress or triggers that may help the plant, release more, put more energy into secondary metabolite production. And we haven't dialed that in for cannabis. And when I say cannabis, we're talking about such a range. Brandon was talking about hazes earlier, which are going to be very different, in terms of finishing time, in terms of fertility needed. So to say there's like a recipe for all cannabis genetics, I think is irresponsible. Um, what we're looking for, like if I were to say 2 weeks out from finish, we want to do a dry down. That may work for some cannabis genetics, and for others, it may
You're
not
getting real
work.
scratchy. You're breaking up.
Oh, okay. Well, that was sort of my thought. I guess just treat your plant well. Um, think about having good biology in the soil and proper fertility. And I think that's really what we're looking for to achieve optimal terroir.
Yeah, I had somebody reach out about a month ago who had purchased some seeds from Turkey and wanted to recreate the same terroir as where these seeds came from, which is admirable, but you know, one, you're not going to turn chocolate vanilla with different terroir. You're still going to need, like Tad was saying, biology and nutrients, and then I would be more concerned about the temperature, the relative humidity, the par levels, things like that. Um, but as far as recreating the actual terroir of some other location, even let's say you go to Turkey and you roll some rice balls around and you get some, localized biology, and you're able to multiply that and take it back home and add it to your soil. How long is it going to last? Is what's in your soil already going to outcompete it, or are your IPM products, trichoderma and other things, going to outcompete it? And so I don't think it's really without spending. And that was his other thing, is it had to be inexpensive. I was like, well, like I went to Epcot many years ago, and I was just fascinated by their hydro setup. It was just mind blowing. So if you had Disney's budget, yeah, maybe you could do that. But you know, for a 4x4 at somebody's house, I don't see how you could.
That's a great question, though. And let me know if I go robotic again, and I'll just shut up. But I want to throw this next question up: endo or mycorrhizal fungi? Um, Cannabis only has a relationship with endo mycorrhizal fungus, and only specific species of endo mycorrhizal fungi are known to infect cannabis roots. So, what you're looking for there's a bunch of different names. Glomus interradices, it's also called Rhizophagus irregularis. It's the exact same thing. They just changed the nomenclature on it. Glomus mossiae, most Glomus species. There's Glomus deserticola. There's a whole bunch of these um, that all have little ecological niches that can have been shown using research that they will infect cannabis. But some may be more effective in like drier regions or drier soil or different soil moisture content or different fertility levels. And so you may want, if you say one doesn't work for you, you could always try another one. The downside to mycorrhizal fungus is heavy metal uptake. Because it increases the uptake of almost all nutrients, it's also increasing the uptake of heavy metals. And so I actually added mycorrhizal fungus at the beginning of this cycle when I transplanted in the plants I got from commercial facility for this cycle. And had I been in a state that did heavy metal testing, I wouldn't have done that, just because I didn't want to risk greater uptake of heavy metals. So for home growers, you can absolutely give it a shot. The brands we carry that I've worked with are Dino Myco out of Israel, and then Wallace Wow, which is made in the United States. Um, Most companies, there's very few companies actually making endomycorrhizal fungus. Premier being the most predominant and largest one. I think they're out of Canada. RTI, Reforest Technologies, is another one. And then mycorrhizal applications. I wasn't aware of that, but recently, I think like in the last few years or decade, they've started manufacturing it as well. I mean, even Paul Stamets doesn't make it. He buys, I think, from mycorrhizal fungus and rebrands it as Fungi Perfecti. So um, you're probably buying the same thing. But keep in mind that like the Dino Myco may perform differently than the um, Wallace Wow, even though they're both Rhizophagus irregularis, because they're different strains of it. One was discovered and cultivated out of Israel in a very arid environment. Another one, the other one might have come out of California in a very different environment. So just something to keep in mind with all microbial products, like Bavaria Bassiana is not Bavaria Bassiana if you buy it from two different sources, even if it says it's the same strain. So
So
I hope that kind of answers it.
yeah, and two other comments. Charcoal's not biochar, and the other one, to bring the phosphorus conversation all the way back around, is one of the reasons I like to put my bare rooted clones directly in contact with mycorrhiza, because I'm not getting tested for heavy metals. Is once your plant has adequate phosphorus, and I make sure that my soil has adequate phosphorus. Once your plants have adequate phosphorus, they're highly unlikely to make that connection with the endomycorrhiza. So it's
Yeah.
good to do early on.
Yeah, it's a one-time application directly to the roots. You don't need to do it more than once. Yeah, like you said, if plants have sufficient available P, they're not going to form the relationship, even though that relationship has a bunch of other benefits besides just phosphorus uptake. So there's a blog post on our website. I think I wrote it like 15 years ago now. I probably need to go back and take a look, but it's a lot of the information we're talking about here. If anyone wants to read more about mycorrhizal fungus. And then I wanted to throw this comment up. It sounds like this person had a bad experience with the Photon app. Um, I tested the Photon app and the diffusers myself side by side. I made a video on YouTube of it and then talk about the results. If anyone wants to do a deep dive on that, the but he was saying his was reading half the actual PPFD, which would definitely be a problem for folks because you would potentially fry your plants. It's very hard visually to see the difference between 600 ppfd and 1000 ppfd. Our eyes are just not that sensitive. um, One thing I will point out about Photon is with all the tariff stuff that's happening right now, we just ran out and went to reorder, and the cost went up 40% because just purely because of tariffs. And so I decided for KiS Organics not to reorder more diffusers, um, hoping because I thought that was just getting too expensive, and I'm hoping that the tariff will change and then we can reorder. But I didn't want to get stuck with a whole bunch of inventory at this higher price point because I didn't know if growers would be willing to pay that. So if you're looking to get the Photon app and you can still find it for 28 bucks on a website, that means they haven't had to reorder yet. And you should, if you're on the fence, buy it now because the price is only going to go up with all the tariff stuff. And not trying to get political here. I just wanted to share that because we did just try to re-up our inventory, and I had to make the decision not to because of price increase. So yeah,
And so while you're talking to Puff, I want to say thank you. I love Miss Donna Jean. She did ruin the deal um, at the Egypt show completely, but I don't care. And yeah, rest in peace, Donna Jean. That's for the deadheads out there. Donna Jean passed away yesterday. So
got it. Yeah. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I'm trying to read comments too. AMF is arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. That's the full name. Again, they keep changing the name on us, but when you see people talking about the word arbuscular, that's what they're referring to. Um, I'm gonna leave the Israel stuff alone because I know that's complicated, and I really try to keep politics off of here, even though it's hard for me sometimes. Let's see. Bought some 400 million-year-old rock dust. I mean, technically, dust is as old as the planet in a lot of ways. Let's see here. Does bricks? Sorry, I'm going through these same time you guys are. Does bricks measure TDS and consequently heavy metals? Um, Brix is purely a measure of sugars. Um, Heavy metals are not sugars, so I don't think it would show up. It would be somewhat of a reflection of TDS, but I don't think it would tell you the full picture. I don't know. Brandon?
I don't, to my understanding, Brix um, only measures sugar levels and wouldn't give you a TDS. Um, yeah, no, I think that's it. That would be really awesome if it worked that way, but I don't. Yeah, and heavy metals would need to be. Heavy metal testing is very complicated and therefore expensive, and you you in most cases you're running, to my understanding, you're running a specific test for each heavy metal. Another reason that it gets expensive, but bricks wouldn't tell you anything about that unless I'm totally misunderstanding this
No,
question, which
it
could be.
wouldn't. I feel confident in saying that. I just think I know a lot of these sugars are, I believe, dissolvable solids, so they might be a
Sugar does
portion of your
sugar
TDS.
sugar glucose doesn't add to TDS, which is
Oh,
that
it
is something.
doesn't.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's something. Yeah, so glucose. Yeah, Yeah. Sorry, my brain just finally caught up to the question. But
That's all
yeah,
right. I just want to be honest when I'm speaking about things that I really don't have any confidence
yeah,
in
yeah.
answering. I can talk to you about bricks and why I don't think it's a good measure for cannabis, but that's not really
There's
what you were
actually
asking.
there's a Dr. Bruce Bugby video where he goes through and puts a bunch of different things in solution, and glucose is one of them, and it doesn't do anything to the TDS. So that's where I got that information.
Yeah, one thing about the Photon app versus the Apogee sensors, there's a certain range, and I talk about this in the video I made of it. Um, there's a certain range that the Photon app owner claims that Apogee doesn't measure correctly, and so he thinks his tool is actually slightly more accurate for these indoor lights. Um, I have an Apogee sensor in my sun system light meter, and I compared that with the Photon app, and I did see there is some discrepancy, but it was a fairly consistent discrepancy. So again, we're talking the difference between a $28 diffuser or even a paper diffuser for free and an app that I think it was like $5 or $6 versus a light meter that's going to run you $250 plus. Um, they're not they're not even in the same ballpark. So that's why, we're talking about on a budget. I think every grower as a tool should have a light meter. I just think it's a really useful tool. How you get there, depends on your budget, but at the very least, it's something worth considering. All right. Sorry, I'm catching up. Yeah, some people have used copy paper filters. I really like the handiness of a diffuser. Um,
I've got an Apogee with a diffuser on it that I've had for I don't know how long, at least 15 years maybe.
Well, the Apogee has like a quantum sensor. The diffuser we're talking about is like a little tiny clip with like a paper thing inside of it. Um, that literally just goes over your phone camera and
Okay.
diffuses the light, and then you use that to get a more accurate sensor. But you can use a specific weight of copy paper as well. It's just harder to put it in place every time, whereas it's just a little clip. You just kind of like a laundry pin with a circle with white paper in the middle of it. You just clip it right on the top of your phone, and then you get a reading when you open the app.
Okay. Interesting.
So let's see here. Chain measure photon to within a 3% degree of error compared to Apogee. Yeah, that's Shane's over at was that Migro, I believe.
I
Migro.
think yeah, Migro.
I think that's the Shane he's referring to. So yeah. Oh, and he's also claiming the one for
iPhone.
iPhone was more accurate than Android. And to be fair, I have a iPhone, so maybe that was the case. But again, it should get you close enough that you can say, okay, this is not 600 ppfd, this is 1,000, or within a range that allows you to make a better decision about where your light is and how much light you're providing to your plant. So yeah. All right. Well, it looks like we managed to make it. It's almost 3 o'clock here in the Northwest, and I apologize for the technical difficulties. This was a last minute trip to get my garden set up today, and that's why I'm not at home. But we should be back at our regular schedule next week, and appreciate everyone tuning in.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. Rest in peace, Donna. Everybody have a good one.